On a glittering Manhattan night, Emily Carter stood at the edge of the empire she had built only to be pushed from it by the two people she trusted most. Her husband, Daniel Hayes, the man she had given her family's wealth, her devotion, her very life, and Claire, her best friend of 10 years, her so-called sister in all but blood. Together, they pressed their hands over hers and forced her into the abyss. Her scream tore across the skyline. The world spun into silence. Death embraced her. But destiny wasn't finished. Emily awoke in her own bed a year before the night she died. No shattered bones, no rooftop, only the cruel memories of betrayal seared into her soul. She touched her unscarred face in disbelief, realizing the impossible. She had been given another chance. Tears turned to fire. Her last thought before dying came roaring back. If I had another chance, I would never forgive. I would make them pay. Welcome to Payback POV Audio, where you'll enjoy short, dramatic stories full of betrayal, heartbreak, and unforgettable revenge. We hope you have a great time listening, and don't forget to hit subscribe so we can bring you even more exciting tales. The night air on the rooftop was sharp, laced with the scent of steel and city lights. Below, the skyline of Manhattan glittered like 1,000 diamonds spilled across black velvet, but to Emily Carr, her chest heaved as she clutched the cold ledge of the building she had once called her triumph, the headquarters of Carter and Hayes, the company she had built with her own blood, connections, and the unrelenting trust she placed in her husband. But now that trust was the very blade pressed against her throat. Why? The word tore from her like a sob, cracking in the air. Her knuckles were white as her fingers clung to the edge. Daniel, tell me this isn't real. Tell me you didn't. She couldn't finish. Not when standing a few steps behind him was Claire, her best friend of 10 years. The woman who had been her maid of honor, her sister in everything but blood, and now her husband's lover. Claire's silk dress clung to her curves, hair spilling over her shoulders in deliberate carelessness. She didn't look guilty. She looked triumphant. Daniel Hayes, the man Emily had once believed she would grow old with, placed his hand gently on Claire's shoulder. That single gesture was a knife twisted in Emily's gut. His face was unreadable, but his eyes, those sharp blue eyes that once looked at her with devotion, were ice. Emily, Daniel said smoothly, like this was a boardroom negotiation. You have to understand, you were never supposed to find out like this. But it doesn't matter anymore. This is bigger than you, bigger than us. Let go. Her heart stuttered. Let go? He meant her grip on the ledge. No. Emily's voice broke, hoarse with disbelief. Daniel, I gave you everything. My family's wealth, my father's connections, my life. And you. Tears blurred her sight. Claire, how could you? You were my sister. Claire tilted her head, lips curving in a poisonous smile. Sisters share everything, don't they? The words sliced through the night like glass. Emily's arms trembled. She could feel her strength ebbing as the sharp wind clawed at her body, tugging her toward the abyss. Her fingernails scraped against concrete. For a brief, insane moment, she thought Daniel might rush forward, pull her up, prove it was all a cruel joke. Instead, he stepped closer to Claire, wrapping an arm around her waist. He leaned down, his lips brushing the shell of her ear, but loud enough for Emily to hear. Don't worry, he whispered. I'll handle this. It's my company. They'll believe whatever I tell them. Then, in one synchronized movement, two pairs of hands, his and Claire's, pressed down on hers. Her scream ripped through the air as her grip gave way. The world tilted, skyscrapers spinning into a blur of light and shadow. Her stomach lurched, her lungs froze, and for a heartbeat she was suspended between life and death. She thought of her parents, of her empty home, of the years wasted beside a man who never loved her. Then the pavement rushed up, and everything shattered into silence, darkness, then light. Her body jerked, and Emily's eyes flew open. She was in her bedroom. The soft ivory curtains billowed as morning light spilled across the room. For a moment, disoriented and trembling, she thought it was some afterlife illusion. She pressed her hand against her chest, expecting blood, broken bones, something. But there was nothing. No rooftop, no fall, just the familiar softness of her bed. Her gaze snapped to the clock on the nightstand. 7:15 a.m. and the date her breath caught. It was April 10th, a full year before the night she died. No. Her voice was a whisper, shaky. She stumbled out of bed, rushing to the mirror. The reflection staring back at her was younger, unscarred by betrayal. She touched her cheek, trembling, and a laugh bubbled up through her tears, bitter, disbelieving. She was alive. Alive. Again. Her knees buckled, and she sank onto the floor, the weight of the revelation pressing against her chest. She remembered the rooftop, Daniel's cold voice, Claire's smirk. She remembered falling, dying, and she remembered her last thought before darkness consumed her. If I had another chance, I would never forgive. I would make them pay. Her hands clenched into fists. God, fate, whatever cruel twist of the universe had given her this, she didn't care. All she knew was that she would not waste it. Daniel thought she was a naive, pampered wife, too blinded by love to see his schemes. Claire thought she could slip into Emily's life, her family's wealth, her husband's bed, without consequence. They were wrong. She would wear her mask. She would smile at Daniel, embrace Claire, and play the fool they believed her to be. But behind the mask, she would sharpen every blade, collect every secret, and bide her time. And when the moment came, Emily rose, straightening her spine. Her reflection glared back at her, not with despair, but with a fire so fierce it scared even her. When the moment comes, she whispered, I'll make you both beg for mercy, and I'll never give it. The game had already begun. The morning passed in a haze. Emily sat in the grand breakfast room of her family's estate, staring at the untouched plate of poached eggs in front of her. The familiar luxury was there, the crystal chandeliers, the marble floors polished to a mirror sheen, the quiet shuffle of staff as they attended to her every whim. Once, this room had felt like security. Now, it felt like a stage, and she was finally seeing the strings that pulled the actors behind the curtain. Her fingers wrapped tightly around the porcelain teacup, but she barely tasted the Earl Grey. Her mind was elsewhere, slipping back into memories she now saw with new eyes. 5 years ago, she had stood at the altar in a gown that cost more than most people's homes, gazing at Daniel Hayes with unshakable devotion. He had looked the part of a perfect groom, tall, handsome, polished. A man who smiled like he meant it, who whispered vows like promises etched in stone. I will cherish you forever, he had said, sliding the diamond ring onto her finger. And she had believed him. God help her, she had believed him. She remembered her parents' pride that day, her father shaking Daniel's hand, calling him the son I never had. She remembered Claire, her maid of honor, standing at her side in blush silk, tears in her eyes as she handed Emily her bouquet. Now, Emily could still see the glint in those tears, not joy, but envy. Not pride, but hunger. She remembered the early days of marriage. Daniel convincing her that with her family's backing, his business dream could take flight. How she had poured her connections, her father's trust, and her own energy into building Carter and Hayes into a rising empire. He had kissed her forehead one night, whispering, "We'll take the world together, Em." Now she realized the truth. He never meant together. He meant through you. He meant until I can stand without you. And Claire, God, Claire. Emily's lips trembled as she recalled the nights they had spent with wine and laughter, sharing secrets only sisters would tell. How Claire had confided in her about every failed relationship, every heartbreak, every dream she chased in the cutthroat world of social media. Emily had opened her home, her wardrobe, even her heart. Claire had smiled, wide and grateful. But behind that smile, Emily now saw it clearly. Calculation. You're so lucky, Em, Claire had said once, tracing the rim of her wineglass. Daniel worships you. Most girls would kill for what you have. At the time, Emily had laughed. Now, she could hear the venom under the words, the jealousy sharp as broken glass. Her breath shuddered as the cruelest memory of all surfaced the day the illusion cracked. It was an ordinary afternoon. She had been in her study, reviewing paperwork, when her phone buzzed with a message. Claire's name lit up the screen. The photo had been blurred, a tangle of sheets and limbs, but there was no mistaking Daniel's face or Claire's. The tilt of her chin, the careless curve of her smile as she pressed her lips against Emily's husband's skin. Emily had dropped the phone. Her vision had gone white, her ears ringing with a sound that wasn't quite real. She had wanted to scream, but all she could do was gasp like a fish torn from water. And then Claire's follow-up text. Oops, wrong person. No apology, no denial. Just 2 words, sharp as a blade twisted between her ribs. Emily snapped back to the present, her hand trembling so violently the teacup rattled against its saucer. She set it down before it shattered, drawing in a ragged breath. Her chest ached with grief, but beneath it was fire. Never again, she whispered to the empty room. She had been blind before, blind and trusting, but now she had eyes sharpened by betrayal, and she would not close them again. Daniel and Claire thought they owned the script. They thought she would walk unknowingly to her own execution a second time. But this time, Emily would rewrite the story. She would smile at them. She would play the loving wife and loyal friend. She would let them laugh behind her back, let them think her a fool, all while sharpening the knives they could not see. And when the curtain fell, when the lights went out, she would stand over their broken empire and watch them crawl. The house was silent, but Emily's mind was anything but. Sleep had eluded her for nights, each hour a battlefield where memory and rage collided. Tonight, exhaustion finally dragged her under only to hurl her back into hell. She was in her study again. The mahogany desk gleamed under the lamplight, paperwork stacked neatly beside her phone. It was an ordinary day, one she remembered all too well. Her phone buzzed. Once, twice. The familiar ding of an incoming message. She reached for it without thinking, lips curving in a faint smile at the sender's name. Claire, her best friend, her confidant. The smile froze. On the screen, tangled sheets, bare skin, two figures entwined in a way that left no doubt. Daniel's face, Claire's smile. Her blood turned to ice. The phone slipped from her grasp, clattering onto the desk. Her vision blurred, the room tilting violently. Her pulse pounded in her ears, drowning out everything else. No, it couldn't be. Daniel loved her. Claire was her sister in all but blood. This had to be some sick mistake. But the truth was undeniable, etched into pixels that carved themselves into her soul. Then the second message appeared. Oops, wrong person. 2 words. Casual, cruel. Emily's breath hitched. A scream clawed its way up her throat but died in silence, as though the air itself had abandoned her. Her chest constricted, every heartbeat a hammer against cracked glass. Why? The whisper tore from her lips, jagged and broken. The study around her flickered. The shadows stretched, distorted, until Claire stepped out of them, not flesh and blood, but a specter in silk, smiling that poisonous smile. You never deserved him, Em. Claire's voice echoed, warped and cruel. You had everything. Money, power, and you thought you could keep Daniel too? You were always too blind. Then Daniel appeared beside her, arms slung around her waist, his expression cold as ice. Let go, Emily, he said, the same words he had whispered on the rooftop before pressing her fingers from the ledge. You were always just a means to an end. Their laughter rang in her ears as the ground opened beneath her. She was falling again, faster, harder, the photo flashing before her eyes like a brand on her soul. Emily jolted awake with a strangled gasp. Her nightgown clung to her skin, damp with sweat. Her pulse thundered, chest rising and falling in ragged heaves. For a moment she stared at the ceiling, half expecting Daniel and Claire's silhouettes to leer down at her. But there was only silence, only the soft rustle of the curtains in the early dawn. Her hands shook as she pressed them against her face. The nightmare had ended, but the pain was real, too real, and yet, it was not despair that filled her veins. It was fire. She threw back the covers and swung her legs onto the floor, the chill of the hardwood steadying her. She crossed to her desk, pulling open a drawer to reveal a fresh leather-bound journal. On the first page, in sharp, deliberate strokes, she wrote a single word, revenge. Below it, she began to list names, dates, places, every thread she remembered from the first time, every whispered conversation she had overheard till late, every shady deal Daniel had brushed aside, every careless brag Claire had let slip about her social media sponsors. She wrote until her hand ached, until the pages filled with venom and clarity. Then she set the pen down and stared at her reflection in the darkened window. Her eyes burned, no longer soft with naive trust. They were steel now, sharpened by betrayal. You ruined my life once, she whispered, voice steady despite the tears streaking her cheeks. But this time, Daniel, this time, Claire, I'll ruin yours. Morning light broke across the city as Emily dressed with meticulous care. The mask of the perfect wife slipped back into place, soft smile, patient eyes, the flawless image Daniel and Claire expected. But beneath the mask, her mind was already moving. She would play her role. She would laugh with Claire, kiss Daniel's cheek, and let them believe she was blind. And while they basked in their shameless affair, Emily would prepare the stage for their destruction. Her nightmare had reminded her of the pain. Now, she would make sure they remembered it to tenfold. Emily learned to move like a ghost through her own life, present, graceful, admired, and utterly invisible to the motives crouched beneath the surface. She greeted Daniel at the breakfast room as if nothing had ruptured the world between them. She tilted her head at Claire's chirpy entrance and offered the warm, sisterly embrace the other woman expected. The household staff murmured polite compliments about how well the couple complemented each other. Nothing in the FOD cracked. No one saw the ledger under Emily's thumb where she spent her hours now, cataloging names, tracking donations, and drawing thin red lines between transactions that didn't belong to any legitimate business deal. It was an act of theater, and she had become its most dangerous performer. The first thing she did was practical. She could have burned through the family's legal team, the private investigators her father insisted upon whenever he sniffed trouble. But Emily wanted control, measured, intimate control that left no fingerprints on the surface. She called an old acquaintance from college, a quiet woman named Rosa who had gone from sociology to cybersecurity out of something like curiosity and boredom. Rosa answered in a sleepy voice, then straightened when she heard Emily's tone. Emily, you okay? Rosa's concern was immediate, genuine. Fine. Emily's smile came through the line, soft and controlled. I need you. Discreetly. Financials, email trails, dark corners. I'm cleaning the house. Rosa did not ask questions. I'll be there tomorrow. Under the mask, Emily felt a small, electric thrill of forwarding plans. She kept Rosa off the main ledger. She whispered names and phone calls cloaked as coaching sessions with a friend. It was important that the breadcrumbs smelled like nothing. At night, she sat with the glow of her laptop and a tumbler of scotch she barely tasted. She learned the painstaking language of money laundering and shell companies, the way payments could be routed through charities and sponsorships until they vanished into thin air. Daniel was clever, he had to be. He had sold that illusion of competence to investors, but clever men often left the same careless footprints. The frivolous expense, the inconsistent invoice, the friend of a friend who received a contract no one else could explain. She made lists. She drew diagrams on butcher paper she later burned. She ordered court papers and corporate filings under aliases, rented P.O. boxes, set up accounts that mapped nothing but conversation. It made her feel feral and precise at once. The next phase was subtler, letting suspicion bloom quietly in their skin. She started with small things that looked like accidents. A dinner with Claire ended with Emily receiving an innocent text, "You were so funny tonight, Em." Right where Claire could see the message. Emily's expression was a breezy laugh, a little embarrassment. "We had a blast," she said aloud. "You looked stunning, by the way. That red really suits you." Claire flushed with pride and the slightest flash of triumph. Emily let it linger. It was a tiny probe. How Claire reacted to public praise, to being watched. It told her the other woman loved the glare more than the person. With Daniel, Emily worked the stage as only a wife who knew him inside out could. She praised mildly in public. That quarterly was quite strong, Dan. She mentioned philanthropic angles that she knew would bring him to boast. I mentioned Carter and Hayes at Dean Whitaker's luncheon. Some interesting doors opened. Daniel puffed up as any man would, joying in the leverage. He liked the image of himself as the architect. He basked in being lauded. Then she let slip something that sounded like a wife's worry. "I saw a memo about a subcontractor in Malta," she said one evening casually as she poured wine. "Did you ever get that resolved?" "I always worry about loose ends." Daniel glanced at the paper, then at his phone, an odd twitch passing over his expression. "Malta?" That's he tried to steer the conversation away with a joke. Emily's smile never faltered. She watched the tiny things that did not belong to the script, the way his hand clenched just so, the barely noticed ring of tension at Claire's jaw when the name Malta drifted into the dinner conversation. She filed those small reactions away like coins in a safe. She let rumors float too, like fragrance on the wind. At a charity gala she attended with Claire, she stood on the terrace speaking low to a columnist she had met through her father. Her voice was warm, disarming, but she made sure the reporter heard the name of an obscure supplier. "You know how small deals sometimes funnel into larger ones," she murmured, letting the idea germinate. The columnist wrote it down, not knowing he held a seed Emily had planted. Emily's life became a choreography of appearances and subplots. At social events, she laughed at Claire's jokes, her hand light on the other woman's elbow. She posted the staged photos her PR team loved, the curated domesticity, a haloed image of a marriage that should be untouchable. The public adored them. They bought the brand of the perfect union with an appetite that felt obscene to Emily. Inside, however, she rotated like a coin on a table, always one face showing to the world, another grinding gears in the dark. Rosa unspooled email chains late into the night and slid them into encrypted folders that only Emily could access. There were transfers that curved around international borders, invoices that referenced non-existent services, a suspicious web of vendors linked to a vanity KOL, Claire's new sponsorship hub. Emily's jaw tightened each time she connected a dot. It was one late November evening when she decided to test her two conspirators more directly. They hosted a private dinner for a handful of investors and influencers in their penthouse. The room glittered with light and self-satisfaction. Emily kept the conversation surface level, making sure her laugh landed and her hand rested on Daniel's arm like an emblem. She watched Claire like a hawk. The other woman floated among the guests, garnering attention with practiced ease. Emily waited until the dessert arrived, until the conversation loosened into comfort. She lifted her glass and spoke. "Do you remember when Daniel first pitched the Malta subcontract?" she asked, the tone featherlight. "It's funny those little mistakes always find you if you sleep." A hush slid across the table. Claire's smile tightened. Daniel's eyes narrowed. an almost invisible flash of panic. The investors exchanged polite confusion. Emily's voice did not tremble. "Just a thought I couldn't shake," she said, smiling. "An old friend told me these things have a habit of surfacing." The pause that followed was a small earthquake. Daniel recovered first, smooth and practiced, but the tremor remained in his hands. Claire dabbed at her lips with a napkin, color draining from her cheeks. Guests pretended not to notice, but gossip thrummed like an insect under glass. Emily let the silence stretch. It was a steel thread she was pulling taut, listening for the sound of something snapping. When Daniel stormed into their bedroom later that night, the man who had once been adept at hiding his temper let it boil into fury. "What are you doing, Em?" His voice was ragged with accusation. She sat on the edge of the bed, fingers steepled, the perfect image of composure. "I'm asking questions," she said simply. "You're paranoid." His jaw clenched. "You're playing dangerous games. The only dangerous thing here," Emily said softly, "is what you both thought you could get away with." He came closer, hot breath fanning her face. "You think you can just..." She held his stare as though it were a blade aimed at his throat. "No," she said. "I don't think." "I know." Daniel's face collapsed into a look she had not seen in years, a raw fear that she recognized like a memory. For a moment, he was no longer the polished CEO or the charming husband. He was a man exposed. Then he controlled himself the way he always had. He kissed her forehead with the practiced tenderness of a man who could fake sincerity until the camera stopped rolling. "We'll handle it, Em. You're making a scene." She let him believe it. When the door closed, she exhaled like someone who had been holding her breath underwater. The mask that had kept her safe fell back into place, and with it, the world saw only the woman who forgave too quickly, who laughed too brightly. But Emily had lit a match. She had shown a hint of flame, and behind the glitter and the carefully posted smiles, fissures had started to form. Late that night, she opened the encrypted folder Rosa had slid into her inbox. A line of numbers and emails scrolled across the screen. A vendor to Claire's KOL network, a suspicious transfer at 2 in the morning, a shell company registered under a name she'd never heard. Emily smiled small, satisfied, not yet triumphant. The game had begun properly now. The moves would be slow, elegant, cruel. Her reflection in the monitor stared back, a woman dressed in silk and power. She had once craved safety. Now she desired only one thing: retribution that tasted as cold and unrelenting as the night in which she had almost died. "Keep them thinking I'm blind," she whispered to the empty room. "Let them laugh while I pull the rope." And somewhere under the glam fawed and whispered lies, the rope began to tighten. If hell had a face, Emily decided, it wore expensive cologne and diamond earrings. Daniel and Claire weren't content to hide in shadows. No, they paraded their affair like children flashing stolen candy, confident no one would dare scold them. At charity events, Daniel would linger too long with his hand on Claire's back, whispering jokes that made her laugh just a little too loudly. At dinner parties, Claire would sit across from Emily and lift her glass to Daniel in a private toast, eyes glittering with triumph. They weren't just cheating, they were taunting her, and Emily smiled, always smiled. Inside, she memorized every shameless detail. The first public spectacle came at a company gala, a night meant to celebrate Carter and Hayes' meteoric rise in the luxury property market. Emily arrived in a gown of emerald silk, the perfect picture of a CEO's wife. Cameras followed her every step, but she could feel the heat of Daniel and Claire's gazes across the room. During the speeches, Daniel introduced Claire not as Emily's best friend, but as a trusted creative partner to our campaigns. The words dripped with audacity. Claire, dressed in silver sequins that clung like a lover's touch, stepped up to the stage with a smile meant for one person only. "Thank you, Daniel," she purred into the microphone. "It's such a privilege to be part of this family." The word made bile rise in Emily's throat. Afterward, in the swirl of champagne and applause, Claire leaned close to Emily, voice low and sticky sweet. "You should be proud. Daniel and I make such a strong team." Emily laughed softly, brushing imaginary lint from Claire's shoulder. "Oh, darling," she murmured, "I couldn't agree more. Teams are only strong until one player betrays the others." Claire blinked, startled, but Emily was already smiling for the cameras again. If they wanted to be bold, she would be bolder. Behind her serene mask, Emily's plans had already sprouted wings. Rosa's investigation had uncovered just enough to light the first match. A series of bribes funneled through Claire's influencer contracts, disguised as promotional FEs. The numbers were small by billionaire standards, but damning if made public. Emily leaked it, not to the authorities, but to a gossip blog notorious for sniffing out celebrity scandal. By the next morning, the headline blazed across social media. Rising KOL Claire Summers accused of shady sponsorship deals, bribes hidden as promo payments. The article was careful, full of alleged and rumored, but it spread like wildfire. Claire's carefully curated image, the golden girl of Instagram, began to crack. Sponsors pulled calls. Fans demanded explanations. Her comments filled with snake emojis and homewrecker accusations from faceless accounts that smelled suspiciously like Emily's hired digital smear team. At breakfast, Claire nearly hurled her mimosa at the wall. "They're lying!" she shrieked, pacing in Daniel's penthouse suite. "It's just trolls, jealous nobodies. Daniel, do something." Daniel clenched his jaw, phone glued to his ear as he tried to calm investors panicking over Carter and Hayes stock, which had dipped 5% overnight. Across the table, Emily stirred her coffee with lazy precision. Strange, isn't it? How fast reputations can turn. 1 minute adored, the next despised. Claire spun toward her. "You think this is funny?" Emily met her glare with a look so calm it was cruel. "I think it's inevitable." Daniel tried to dismiss the scandal as baseless internet rumors. He even arranged a press conference to show unity, dragging Claire onto the stage beside him. Cameras flashed as he wrapped an arm around her waist, declaring, "These are malicious lies spread by envious competitors. Claire is not just a partner in business, she's family, family again." The reporters ate it up, but Emily saw what the cameras didn't. The beads of sweat at Daniel's temple, the way Claire's smile twitched at the edges. They were still brazen, but cracks were forming. That night, as they celebrated their victory with champagne, Emily walked into the room holding her phone, screen glowing. "Interesting," she said lightly, scrolling. "The SEC just announced they'll be looking into influencer payment disclosures. Bad timing for you too, isn't it?" Daniel's hand froze mid-toast. Claire paled. Emily's smile widened, sweet and venomous. The shameless lovers thought they owned the spotlight. They thought they could humiliate her and still rise higher. But Emily had lit the fire beneath their stage, and she would watch with satisfaction as it collapsed under their feet. And this, she promised herself, was only the beginning. The news cycle moved like wildfire, and Emily was its secret arsonist. Claire's sponsorship scandal hadn't died down. If anything, it was mutating. Fans who once worshipped her every selfie now dissected old photos, pointing out designer bags she couldn't afford, vacations she must have gotten through shady means, brands she had begged for partnerships were quietly pulling contracts. Her Instagram comments were a battlefield of betrayal memes, snake emojis, and mistress hashtags. Claire, of course, screamed at Daniel daily. "They're ruining me," she sobbed one night, mascara streaking her cheeks as she threw her phone onto the bed. "Do something. You promised you'd protect me." Daniel pinched the bridge of his nose, rage simmering beneath his polished facade. "It's a phase, Claire. The internet forgets. What matters is the company, and if I can hold Carter and Hayes steady through this storm, we'll be untouchable." Emily sipped her wine from the corner of the suite, her presence as quiet as a guillotine. She let them argue, let them bare their throats to each other, all while she already knew what Daniel didn't. The storm was only just beginning. The next morning, Carter and Hayes stock dipped another 3%. Not catastrophic, but enough to put the board on edge. Investors hated instability, and the words SEC probe had started to slither into news articles. Emily made her move. She called her father Richard Carter, a man who could make senators stammer with a raised eyebrow. Their relationship had always been complex, but she knew his protective streak when it came to his only daughter. "Father," she said sweetly, "I'm worried about Daniel's leadership. He's been distracted. The company's in danger." Richard grunted. "I told you marrying him was a mistake. You did." She let the silence hang, heavy with unspoken, "and you were right." Then she slid in the blade. "But we can still salvage Carter and Hayes if the board sees what's happening behind closed doors." By the end of that call, Richard Carter had promised two things. His team of lawyers would start reviewing Carter and Hayes' financials, and he would quietly rally board members against Daniel. 2 days later, Emily orchestrated another strike. A rival CEO, Miles Donovan of Sterling Estates, had always sniffed around Carter and Hayes deals, waiting for weakness. Emily invited him to lunch at a private club, smiling like a hostess but speaking like a queen. "Miles," she said, dabbing her lips with a linen napkin, "rumor is my husband's company is vulnerable. I'd hate for Sterling to miss an opportunity." Miles' eyes glittered with intrigue. "And you'd prefer, what? That we make trouble?" "Not trouble." Emily's smile was razor thin. "Pressure. Enough to rattle the cage." Within a week, Sterling Estates leaked a confidential bid that Carter and Hayes had been preparing for months. The press pounced, calling it a rookie mistake that left the company scrambling. Daniel exploded behind closed doors, cursing at his staff, veins standing out in his neck. Claire posted another smiling photo on Instagram, oblivious, hashtagging #unbothered. Emily almost laughed. The gala incident became a boardroom crisis. One evening, Daniel stormed into their penthouse, tie askew, eyes bloodshot. "They're questioning my competence, Emily," he spat, pacing like a trapped animal. "The board, my own executives, they're whispering that I've lost control. This is your father's doing, isn't it?" Emily tilted her head, expression soft, almost wounded. "Darling, why would my father sabotage his son-in-law?" Daniel's jaw tightened. He didn't answer. He couldn't. Behind his rage, Emily saw it clearly. Fear. He was losing grip. The empire he thought he owned was slipping like sand through his fingers. The next strike was financial. Emily, through proxies, began buying Carter and Hayes stock every time it dipped. Not in bulk, not enough to trigger alarms, but steadily, quietly. Each percentage point lost by the market became another inch of power in her hands. And when Rosa uncovered proof of embezzlement, Daniel funneling money into accounts linked to Claire's influencer agency, Emily knew she had her weapon of mass destruction. She didn't release it yet. Timing was everything. Instead, she slipped the evidence to one trusted journalist, a man known for patience. "Not yet," she told him. "But when the cracks widen, you'll know when to publish." At home, Claire became even more brazen in her shamelessness. One evening, as they lounged in the penthouse, she draped herself over Daniel's lap and smirked at Emily. "You don't mind if I borrow this one for the night, do you, Em?" "You've had him long enough," Daniel chuckled, stroking her hair like she was a prized pet. Emily's stomach twisted with disgust, but her face never wavered. She simply raised her glass. "Borrowed things," she said coolly, "tend to break faster." Claire frowned, not understanding. Daniel laughed too loudly, trying to cover the tension, but Emily knew. The empire was already breaking, and she was the one holding the hammer. By the end of that week, Carter and Hayes had lost 12% in stock value, 2 sponsors had pulled out, and whispers of insider corruption circled like vultures. Daniel clung to Claire tighter than ever, desperate for her validation. Claire clung to the cameras, desperate for the spotlight. Neither realized they were dancing on a stage Emily had already set ablaze. And Emily, serene, smiling, untouchable, waited for the flames to consume them both. The story broke on a Monday morning, the day Daniel had scheduled a live interview with CNBC to reassure investors. Emily had timed it perfectly. The journalist she'd slipped evidence to weeks before had held his fire until the stock dipped below a critical threshold. Now, as Daniel rehearsed polished lines in front of the mirror, Emily refreshed her phone to see the headline explode across every screen in America. Carter and Hayes CEO under fire. Alleged bribes, money laundering linked to rising influencer Claire Summers. The article was brutal screenshots of bank transfers, suspicious contracts, shell companies tied to Claire's KOL agency. It wasn't airtight evidence, but it was damning enough to ignite public fury. Twitter trended with hashtag Carter corruption and hashtag clairvoyant Claire, the nickname trolls had given Claire after she posted a tone-deaf video saying she saw this coming. Memes flooded in. Daniel's face photoshopped onto dollar bills, Claire's Instagram selfies plastered with captions like "sponsored by fraud." Investors panicked. Reporters swarmed the company headquarters. By noon, Carter and Hayes stock had tanked 18%, and Daniel still had to go on live television. Emily watched the broadcast from her suite, glass of wine in hand. Daniel sat beneath the bright studio lights, jaw tense but smile fixed, like a man tap dancing on quicksand. "These allegations," he began smoothly, "are baseless. Carter and Hayes has always operated with integrity. My wife and I," the host cut him off. "Actually, Mr. Hayes, your wife has not issued a statement, but Claire Summers, your so-called creative partner, is directly implicated. Are you confirming a personal relationship with her?" The question hit like a bullet. Daniel's mask slipped, just for a second, the corner of his mouth twitching, the glint of panic in his eyes. He stammered, "That's irrelevant. Claire is a professional partner." On Twitter, someone clipped that exact second. Within minutes, the clip went viral. Daniel Hayes, sweating under the lights, denying with a shaky voice. Emily smiled. Claire, meanwhile, was imploding online. She live-streamed a teary-eyed rant from her penthouse bathroom, swearing she had done nothing wrong while surrounded by designer bags worth more than most viewers' salaries. The comments were savage. "Sis crying in Chanel, we don't feel sorry. Did Daniel script this for you too? Where's Emily? Queen deserves justice." By the time Claire ended the stream, hashtag cancel Claire had trended worldwide. Sponsors publicly dropped her, one after another, in carefully worded statements. She stormed into the living room where Daniel was pacing on the phone with lawyers. "This is your fault," she shrieked, mascara smeared, hair a wild halo. "You told me no one would ever find out. You said I was untouchable." Daniel snapped his phone shut, face mottled with fury. And you were supposed to keep your mouth shut. Do you have any idea what I'm cleaning up right now? Emily sat on the armchair, legs crossed, swirling her wine. She didn't need to say a word. Watching them turn on each other was sweeter than any speech she could give. By Thursday, late-night hosts had picked up the story. Carter and Hayes turns out the only thing they were building was offshore accounts. One comedian quipped, flashing a photo of Daniel beside Claire on a yacht. The audience howled. Claire's face became tabloid fodder. The mistress influencer who brought down a millionaire, Daniel's name was plastered across business pages as the CEO under siege, and through it all, Emily remained silent. Her silence was the loudest statement of all. Reporters begged her for comment, paparazzi trailed her car, but she never once broke composure. She attended a charity gala with her father, dazzling in diamonds, smiling serenely as cameras shouted her name. Social media lit up with hashtags of its own. Hashtag stand with Emily and hashtag the real Mrs. Hayes. For once, the world was on her side. Daniel's board convened an emergency meeting that Friday. Emily didn't attend, but she didn't need to, her father did. By the time Daniel returned home, he was livid, pacing like a lion in a cage. They want me to step down, he roared, slamming his fist against the glass table. My own board traitors. They're threatening a vote if I don't cooperate with regulators. Claire curled on the sofa, scrolling through hate comments, muttering curses under her breath. Maybe it's better if you just resign for a while. Let the heat die down. Shut up, Claire. Daniel snapped, whirling on her. You've done enough damage. The room went silent. Emily set down her glass with deliberate grace. Her voice was velvet, cutting through the tension. Maybe, she said softly, you shouldn't have underestimated the people you betrayed. Daniel spun toward her, eyes narrowing, but he didn't reply. He couldn't, because for the first time, he realized Emily wasn't just the betrayed wife, she was the executioner. By Sunday night, Carter and Hayes stock was down 27%. The SEC had officially announced an investigation. Investors were fleeing, sponsors cutting TIs, board members whispering Daniel's name like it was a curse. And Emily, elegant, untouchable Emily, had never looked stronger. The empire was collapsing, live on every screen in America, and Emily was there to watch every glorious second. The courthouse buzzed like a beehive. Reporters swarmed the marble steps, cameras flashing as black cars pulled up one by one. Headlines screamed across every screen. Emily Carter files for divorce amid scandal. Battle for Carter and Hayes' fortune begins. Emily stepped out of her car, radiant in a navy suit tailored to perfection. Diamonds glittered at her ears, but it was her composure that silenced the crowd. She didn't wave, she didn't smile. She walked up the steps like a queen marching into a coronation, each heel clicking with purpose. Behind her, Daniel emerged from another car, face grim, jaw clenched. Claire slithered beside him in an ivory dress far too bridal for the occasion, clutching his arm with desperate defiance. The cameras ate up the scorned wife versus the shameless mistress, the husband caught between them. But Emily wasn't here to play triangles. She was here to win. Inside the courtroom, the air was thick with tension. Rows of spectators leaned forward in their seats. Even the judge looked faintly curious. This wasn't just a divorce, it was a public reckoning. Emily sat across from Daniel, her lawyers flanking her like sentinels. He tried to meet her gaze with the cool authority he once wielded, but she didn't flinch. Case 2025 CV317, the clerk announced. Carter versus Hayes, her attorney, a silver-haired woman with eyes like scalpels, rose first. Your Honor, this is not merely a case of marital dissolution. This is a case of betrayal, financial fraud, and theft, all at the expense of my client, Emily Carter. Daniel's lawyer objected immediately, voice booming. Your Honor, we are here for a divorce, not a smear campaign. But the judge raised a hand. Mr. Sullivan, you'll have your turn. Proceed, Miss Keene, and proceed she did. One by one, Emily's team laid out the evidence Rosa had uncovered. Transfers from Carter and Hayes' accounts into Claire's shell companies. Lavish purchases disguised as marketing expenses. Claire's influencer contracts riddled with false disclosures. On the projection screen, images flickered. Bank statements, emails, Claire's own signature on fraudulent invoices. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Reporters scribbled furiously. Claire squirmed in her seat, her perfect facade cracking. Daniel's face reddened, veins bulging at his temple. Emily sat still, her hands folded neatly on the table. The calm in the storm. When her lawyer was finished, the judge leaned forward. Mr. Hayes, do you dispute these transfers? Daniel's lawyer scrambled for words, but Daniel himself snapped. Those were business expenses. Every CEO manages funds. Emily's voice cut through like a blade. Every CEO doesn't funnel company money into his mistress's Instagram page. Gasps filled the room. Claire's face went pale, her lips trembling. The divorce settlement became a massacre. Emily's lawyers reminded the court that every house, every car, every luxury asset had been purchased under her name. Her family's wealth had funded the empire Daniel claimed as his own. Without her backing, Carter and Hayes wouldn't exist. The properties, the judge ruled, remain in Mrs. Carter's possession, the vehicles as well. And given the clear financial misconduct presented today, Mr. Hayes will forfeit any claim to her inheritance. Daniel's fists clenched on the table. His empire, his image, his possessions stripped in broad daylight. Claire, foolish enough to whisper loudly, hissed, "It doesn't matter, baby. We'll rebuild." Emily turned her gaze on her former best friend, eyes cold. Rebuild with what, Claire? The sponsorships you lost? The followers who call you a fraud? Or Daniel's reputation, which is worth less than dust? Laughter rippled through the spectators. The judge banged the gavel for silence, but the damage was done. Claire's cheeks burned scarlet. Daniel glared at Emily with hatred so raw it almost shook her. But beneath it, she saw fear. By the time court adjourned, the ruling was clear. Emily walked away with her family's properties intact, the cars, the estate, and financial leverage. Daniel was left clinging to the crumbling shell of Carter and Hayes, now under SEC investigation and bleeding investors daily. Outside, reporters swarmed again. "Mrs. Carter, do you have a statement?" Emily paused on the courthouse steps, cameras flashing like lightning. Her voice carried, calm and measured, every word a dagger. "Betrayal destroys more than trust," she said. "It destroys empires. Today is not just the end of a marriage. It's the beginning of accountability." The crowd erupted in cheers. Hashtags flooded Twitter within minutes. Hashtag Queen Emily. Hashtag justice served. Hashtag end of the Hayes era. Daniel and Claire slipped out the back, booed by onlookers. Their shamelessness had finally met its consequence. And Emily stood tall in the storm she had conjured, untouchable. The court battle was over. The marriage was over. But her revenge was just reaching its climax. The downfall of Daniel Hayes wasn't quiet. It was loud, messy, and splashed across every headline. Within weeks of the courtroom humiliation, Carter and Hayes collapsed under its own weight. The SEC's investigation froze company accounts. Investors fled like rats from a sinking ship. Daniel was forced to resign as CEO, his polished statements drowned out by hashtags labeling him a fraud. Claire, meanwhile, became a walking punchline. Every selfie she posted was mocked. Brands refused to touch her. Former fans spammed her lives with comments like, "Where's the bribe money now?" And homewreckers don't get sponsorships. Together, they spiraled. Daniel paced their penthouse like a caged animal. His suits hung looser now, his eyes hollow with sleeplessness. "I can fix this," he muttered, pacing in circles. "I just need capital. A new startup. I've rebuilt before, you didn't rebuild." Claire screamed from the sofa, mascara smeared. "She built it for you. Emily and her family gave you everything." The words hung in the air like poison. Daniel froze, the truth slicing deeper than any insult. "You ungrateful," he lunged, fist slamming the wall beside her head. Claire flinched, trembling, but her voice was shrill with desperation. "You think you're scary? You're nothing without her money, Daniel. Nothing." He staggered back, hands in his hair. His empire was gone. His investors laughed behind closed doors. He had become a pariah in the city he once ruled. And then Claire announced she was pregnant. The paparazzi swarmed. Tabloids screamed, "Mistress to mother." Claire Summers expecting Daniel Hayes' child. From Queen Emily to baby mama Claire, the fall of a dynasty. Claire strutted out of the clinic with a sonogram photo clutched to her chest, flashing it to cameras like a trophy. "This changes everything," she whispered to Daniel, her eyes glittering. "The world will forgive us when we're a family. They'll see you as a father. You'll get sympathy." Daniel stared at the photo, something like hope flickering in his ruined eyes. A child, his heir, his second chance. They arranged a private dinner with Emily, a foolish, arrogant move, but desperation had made them reckless. Emily arrived in black silk, her calm aura slicing through the room like ice. Daniel and Claire sat across from her, hands intertwined, smug with fragile confidence. Claire slid the sonogram across the table, chin lifted. "We thought you should be the first to know. Daniel and I are expecting. You couldn't give him a child, Emily, but I can." Emily's lips curved into a slow, cold smile. "Is that so?" Daniel stiffened. Something in her tone unnerved him. Emily leaned forward, voice low but sharp enough to cut glass. "Daniel can't father children. The doctors told us years ago. He's infertile. Silence slammed down. Claire blinked, confusion dawning into horror. What? Daniel's face went white, then red, fury twisting his features. You're lying. But Emily's gaze was merciless. Am I? Or did you never wonder why 5 years of marriage produced nothing? The color drained from Claire's face as the truth struck. Her hand trembled on the sonogram. But, Daniel's chair screeched as he shoved to his feet, eyes blazing with madness. Who is it? He roared, voice echoing. Whose child are you carrying? Paparazzi cameras flashed outside the restaurant windows, capturing every second of the chaos. Reporters tweeted live updates. Scandal erupts. Emily Carter confronts Daniel Hayes and Claire Summers in shocking dinner showdown. The video clip went viral within minutes. Claire sobbing, Daniel raging, Emily sitting still as a statue, her smile colder than winter. The next days were carnage. Claire's pregnancy became a scandal of its own. Headlines speculated about the father. Social media tore her apart. Pregnant and cheating? The audacity. Daniel's reputation, already in shreds, dissolved entirely. No company would fund his new startup. Old allies ghosted him. Even family refused his calls. Daniel's mind cracked under the weight. He drank until dawn, muttered to himself in empty rooms, hurled bottles at walls. Claire, terrified of losing her lifestyle, clung to him tighter even as he snarled, accused, and shoved her away. They had once been shameless, now they were monstrous. The final explosion came one stormy night. Neighbors later told reporters they heard shouting, glass breaking, and Claire's voice shrieking. By dawn, police swarmed the penthouse. Claire Summers was found dead. Daniel Hayes was arrested, hands covered in her blood. The tabloids didn't even feign shock. From millionaire to murderer, the fall of Daniel Hayes, Claire Summers dead in domestic horror betrayal ends in blood. Emily watched the news in silence, sipping her tea. She felt no pity, no grief, only closure. They had betrayed her, they had mocked her, they had tried to kill her. Now, they had destroyed themselves. And as the world watched the monsters devour each other, Emily Carter stood untouched, rising from the ashes they left behind. The trial of Daniel Hayes became a national spectacle, but Emily stayed away. She didn't need to sit in a courtroom to watch the final act of his downfall. The headlines told her everything. Hayes convicted. Life sentence for murder of mistress, from empire to inmate. The tragic spiral of Daniel Hayes. Claire Summers' funeral drew paparazzi but no mourners of substance. Her sponsors had abandoned her, her followers had vanished, and the man she destroyed her best friend for had ended her life. It was over, and Emily Carter was still standing. The board of Carter and Hayes had begged her to return. Investors whispered that only Emily could restore stability. With Daniel disgraced and the company crumbling, she was the only name that carried trust, legitimacy, power. She walked into the glass headquarters, the same building where she had once fallen from the rooftop with her head high. Every employee turned to watch as she stepped through the lobby, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. Mrs. Carter, are you taking over as CEO? Is this the rebirth of Carter and Hayes? What message do you have for women betrayed like you were? Emily paused at the podium, her reflection gleaming in the marble floors. Her voice was steady, commanding, a queen reclaiming her throne. Carter and Hayes will rise again, she declared, but this time, it will be built on integrity, not lies. Betrayal tried to destroy me. Instead, it made me stronger. Today, we begin a new era, the crowd roared. Hashtags trended worldwide. Hashtag Queen Emily, hashtag New Era Carter, hashtag Reborn From Ashes. Emily had not only taken back everything that was hers, she had taken the empire Daniel once claimed as his own. In the weeks that followed, Emily moved like a storm through the business world. She cut corrupt TIs, rebuilt investor confidence, and signed new deals with efficiency that left competitors stunned. The stock surged higher than ever. Her father, once skeptical of her strength, looked at her with pride. And one evening, as she signed off on a major partnership, she looked up to see Miles Donovan, the rival CEO who had once circled Carter and Hayes like a vulture, now standing beside her, offering his hand. "Congratulations, Emily," he said, his voice warm but edged with respect. "You didn't just win. You rewrote the game." Emily studied him. Tall, sharp, dangerous in the way only a man who built his own empire could be. But unlike Daniel, his gaze held no hunger for what she had, only admiration for what she was. She shook his hand, lips curving into the faintest smile. "The game isn't over, Miles. It's only beginning." Their eyes met, not with desperation, not with betrayal, but with possibility. Months later, the city had moved on from Daniel and Claire's scandal. Their names were footnotes, cautionary tales of greed and arrogance. But Emily Carter remained on every front page, every business column, every most influential list. She was no longer the betrayed wife, no longer the naive heiress. She was a leader, a survivor, and a woman who had taken back everything stolen from her. One morning, as she stood on the rooftop of Carter and Hayes, the same place where she had once fallen to her death, she let the wind rush against her face. But this time, she wasn't clinging to a ledge. She was standing tall, the city spread out beneath her like a kingdom she had conquered. She closed her eyes, breathing in the future. Her past was ashes, her betrayers were gone, and Emily Carter was reborn, victorious.
Every scandal's a spark, every heartbreak's a flame. Unforgettable endings, you'll remember the name. We'll take you through love, through the lies they weave. Every twist, every turn, you just won't believe. This is payback, POV. Revenge and rhythm, pure energy. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in to Payback POV. Follow, hit subscribe, and join us for more unforgettable stories of betrayal, heartbreak, and sweet revenge. This is Payback POV. Where the tales hit hard like destiny. Stay a while, let the stories flow. Don't forget to like and hit subscribe below. Every scandal's a spark, every heartbreak's a flame. Unforgettable endings, you'll remember the name. We'll take you through love, through the lies they weave. Every twist, every turn, you just won't believe. This is Payback POV. Revenge and rhythm, pure energy. Thanks for listening, come back soon. We'll draw new tales neath the blood red moon. Thanks for tuning into Payback POV. You hit follow, hit subscribe, and join us for more unforgettable stories of betrayal, heartbreak, and sweet revenge.